want to thank everybody for tuning in. This is obviously a very popular topic. We've got a number of signups. As I say, they're slowly filing in here. But tonight our webinar is on establishing perennials with cover crops. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a background of why we think this is a good concept and is a viable practice both on the prairies, but really anywhere we're trying to establish perennials. And that is plant diversity. Each plant attracts and stimulates with its root exudates new and diverse biology. So going into a perennial stand, a diverse perennial stand, where we're trying to utilize legumes and grasses together for the system to be self-sustaining and feed itself, we're in need of this biology anyway to access the minerals that are free living or available in the soil profile. So the concept kind of goes is, why not stimulate that biology heading into a perennial system with an annual seeded cover crop as your nurse crop going into the year. So it's been a couple weeks since I've done this. I want to thank Dakota and Connor for hosting the last couple of weeks. My wife and my vacation to Guatemala was beautiful. It was quite an eye-opening experience walking out of Winnipeg Airport to -45. You can see my face is still a little frostburnt. I will survive. Don't feel too bad for me. So as per usual, the best questions voted on by me solely are going to be getting prizes. So best question of the night gets a jacket. Second best question of the night will be getting a hat. So make sure you're putting those questions in the Q&A and not the chat. Feel free to be typing in questions as our panelists are introducing themselves and talking about their practices and their farm. I'll filter through and get the questions down. We do have quite a few participants on the webinar tonight, so I'm going to try and do some grouping of some questions just so we can try and get as many questions answered as possible. So this is our panelists tonight. So we're really lucky again to have three very well thought out, different background farms that are utilizing this practice on their farm. So Connor English was our host last week. I'm very grateful for Connor for doing that, but also coming on the webinar tonight. He's a wealth of knowledge in this area. Gerald Bos. So Gerald has been doing on their farm perennial production for quite some time. So really he's the panelist veteran on the crew tonight. So Gerald's got years of experience with both utilizing or establishing and utilizing perennials on the farm. So we're going to get into some best practices as far as longevity, seed depth, seed to soil contact. And Nick Petruic is coming on. Nick is a little bit different of a background. Nick is a straight grain farm, but is utilizing some perennial hay in some kind of high-risk salinity spots. So we've got a diverse background of people, panelists on the webinar tonight. So yeah, just a great group of guys to be able to answer some questions that you may have burning. So our first panelist tonight, you may recognize him as the host of last week's webinar or 2 weeks ago webinar. So Connor English from Bradwardine. I think I'm saying that right, Connor. Connor's actually just behind that wall behind me. Fortunately, we're both at Egg Days, so we get to hang out all day. And now we get to do a webinar tonight. So Connor, if you're there, need your screen on and unmuted. Beauty. So for those of people that weren't on the webinar a couple weeks ago, Connor, why don't you give an introduction, yourself, your family, your farm, and then we'll kind of get into her.
So yeah, Connor English, farm with my family west of Rivers at Bradwardine, Manitoba. Worked with the Covers & Co crew since the spring, and yeah, so 5th generation on the family farm. We'll be celebrating 127 years this year with our family on our farm, Bradwardine, which is pretty special. Quite a bit of change across our farm over the last few years. Where we've established perennials across about 85% of our land base. In the past, mixed grain and livestock operation, and we've transitioned closer to solely all livestock cattle at this point. And perennials were a big part of that, utilizing them in our intense grazing system. So obviously establishing them is something that we've been working away at the last couple of years, seeding down a few quarters of grass in a diverse mix, and yeah, establishing them in a few different ways, utilizing some companion crops, a couple different forms, and so yeah.
So first question of the night for me, Connor. You were sowing down land into perennial hay when canola was $20 an acre. How do you
Absolutely, I was. It
find-
was about $25 an acre, I think, Joe. So
or
yeah,
a bushel, I should say.
yeah, $25 a bushel. Yes, not an acre. Much more than
It's
that.
heading there.
Yeah. So yeah, a little bit of history, I guess. 2022, had a great opportunity to return home to the farm. Made some plans to expand our cow herd, and that meant growing some more grass. Seeking pasture off the farm was becoming a continual issue to try and find more pasture land. So took the opportunity to seed down some of our really good high productive grain land, with plans to really intensify our grazing operation to maximize our production, and utilization of these forages, with grazing at high density and utilizing long rest periods. So I guess a couple pictures there, the picture of the swather and the old grain truck, that was from 2022. That year we sowed down just shy of 300 acres of perennial forages. We had all but 80 acres that didn't make it. But we had a half section that really did well that year. Obviously, there's a picture there of us swathing the oat crop. We sowed 100 acres oats and 100 acres of barley that year, on the stuff that did end up working out. We ended up combining each of those 100-acre fields. So we utilized the seeding rate on the oats and barley at about a half what you would normally seed oats or barley at, and then sowed down our perennial mix at about 10 to 12 pounds an acre. It depends how the old 6800 Borgo puts it on, but we were pretty darn close to that 10 to 12 pounds. So yeah, seeded down our companion crop first, and then perennials following, just very lightly into the ground, and then followed that with a harrow pass. And we were very grateful that year with a lot of precipitation. Got a really good catch of perennials, obviously. And that set us up for a lot of success on those acres that stuck. Picture there, the roller, that was from this spring. So like I said, we had 80 acres that didn't make it in moving into 2023. We had some weed problems out on that land for a few years prior to, so it was a bit of a shot in the dark in 2022 when we sowed it down. If it was going to work or not, we combined the oats and green feeded a bit of the oats on that land as well. But just didn't have a good enough catch. So we took it out of production for 2023, cleaned the field up with a soybean crop. And then we were set in a good position with a clean field heading into this past spring. Once again, really lucky with the spring that we had, lots of moisture, cool temperatures, which was just perfect for those perennials to start off in the springtime. And we were able to get the 80 acres sown down. We used full season cover crop this year as our companion crop, and tweaked our blend a little bit this year on the perennial side of things, custom blend that we created, and sowed that down about the middle of May. So had a really good catch on that. And I guess you can probably go to the next slide there, Joe.
So Connor, I'm going to interrupt you. When you were designing a blend or choosing a blend, what did you have in mind? Like, was the plan for this land to go into grazing, or was it something like a hybrid where it may be hayed, it may be grazed? What was the goal when you were choosing that or deciding to sow that down?
For the majority of this land, definitely going into solely grazing. We have done some haying in the past, and there is a decent amount of alfalfa in the mix that we can utilize to make some pretty high quality hay as well. But long-term goal for sure on the grazing side of things. We've got a very high percentage of grasses in the mix. Just with having some experience grazing forages late into the fall and the stockpiling ability that they have. Really happy with a few species like orchard grass and tall fescue around our area for how they do on a production side of thing, and also their ability to stockpile to be used either late into the fall in the dormant season or carry over through winter and utilize in the spring season. So we do have legumes in the mix for sure. This year, specifically in this field, it's about 20% alfalfa, We've got some red clover, sandfoin, and Sicer milk vetch in it as well. So a decent amount of legumes, but predominantly grasses, with the sole fact of just kind of giving us the ability to utilize it at multiple different times of the year. And I guess on that side of things too, we had more alfalfa show up in that half section that we sowed down in the first year than I was expecting. I don't know if the catch was just really good, but we ended up with a very high percentage of alfalfa right off the bat. I think as we move through the years, we will see more grasses show up. They're just a little longer establishing, but yeah, we have a very high percentage of alfalfa realistically for a grazing system, but just utilizing our grazing management to make the most of it and put ourselves in a good position, that we can utilize that high quality forage and it not be a risk to us. So
What are we looking at here?
I guess a shot from this picture here was our full season that we used it as a companion crop this year while seeding down with perennials. So we ended up utilizing 60 pounds to the acre, the recommended seeding rate for full season. Had talked with Owen this past winter a little bit on what his thoughts were for seeding down full season cover crop with perennials, and we both came to the conclusion, kind of in the half rate of barley or half rate of oats, we'd be right around that range anyways for weight. So we thought, well, let's just go with it. We had a plan of likely silaging it, and we did this year just to ensure we could get that crop off the field very quick. Very lucky to have our neighbors be able to swath for us and some local custom silage crew. I was away that day on the road, and I think they had it swathed and put in a pile within 6 hours on 80 acres. So there was absolutely no chance of any product laying on the land as for any length of period of time, and putting those young perennials in jeopardy for killing them off. So yeah, that was our full season
Connor,
this year.
let me interrupt you there, because I think this is going to be a theme too, and a question that I get asked lots. It's like, what are you looking for as far as timing on the initial harvest? Is it just get it off if the canopy's closing in too high? Is it still trying to maximize that? Is it focusing on how much moisture we've had and how stressed that perennial stand is? Just give us a kind of a little spotlight on like what your thought process was when you're trying to figure out when to harvest that.
So for this crop this year, I mean, it was a little bit different in 2022 when we took the crops for combining. Obviously, they were well into September when we were doing the harvest there, which is a little harder to, I would say, in a high rain event year. That is easier to do than not. In a year like we had this year, where things did dry up a little bit in the summertime, it really put us in a good position to harvest this with lots of days of the summer still ahead of us, just to open that canopy up to give the perennials as much chance as possible to regrow and put themselves in a good state moving into the winter months. So a little bit, I guess, on both sides of that, we wanted to harvest it early just to open the canopy up, but we're also taking the full season at a point where the silage shopper had availability to come. So when he has the ability to come, we say, yes, come. And the other one would be, I guess, just the stage at where the full season was at when we cut it. This picture obviously right here looks quite green, but we had different regions of the field that had burnt up quite a bit, and were much drier. The straw had browned off quite a bit at that point. So we were kind of around the milky soft dough stage on the cereals in the full season crop. So definitely trying to get some good quality on the crop that we're silaging, but then also taking it off earlier in the summer, the better, just to open that canopy up for the perennials to catch any moisture that we get through the month of August and September, and capture as much sunlight as possible heading into winter.
Cool. Well, what's going on here? You got to be descriptive, because I didn't know what this was, and I know you do this on your farm.
So here's a picture. This was new for us this year to put a cover. We had never chopped a cereal crop ever before, only silage corn. So it was a little bit different for us this year. Hoping to get into this full season silage pile later this winter, I believe. We will get into it, but we're building our silage piles remotely away from the yard, close to where we have water sources, and building them so that we can graze them with the cows, string of hot wire across the face of the pile. and feed the silage to the cattle without using any equipment. So we built this pile here. This year is about 6 feet high. Generally, our corn is about 8 feet. But yeah, anywhere around that 6 to 8 feet high for corn silage piles, or cover crop piles for that matter. And then we're utilizing it without any machinery throughout the winter months. So this year, just the companion crop that we use the full season, obviously, 80 acres of crop. We figured that we might be in jeopardy on trying to get that to dry down and bale, and putting some of those young perennials at risk of dying if we had a swathling on them. So we just chose the option to silage them this year, take it off quick, high quality feed, and put it in a pile in a good timely manner, and we can feed it out at a really cost efficient way. So yeah.
Cool.
Here's a few shots. I guess the one on the left is a picture of the regrowth, the full season, as well as the perennials in that one field that we seeded down this summer. So that picture would have been probably middle to end of September this year. We had tremendous growing season right from the time that we harvested that full season cover crop at the end of July. Nothing but good conditions on a sunlight, heat, and moisture well into the fall this year, which really put all those perennial seeds as well as the regrowth on the full season in a position to thrive. And I'll tell you what, the deer are absolutely loving that right now. There's about 50 deer out in that field every single day from morning till night, just eating away. I hope it's still in a good position next spring when we get the cows in there. But
I think that is a good question, and one that we got from some of the audience members is like something like that. Like, that's phenomenal growth. I don't imagine that's going to happen every time you're sowing down a perennial hay stand. But was there any temptation as far as grazing that this past fall, and would you ever do it?
thought about it briefly. Asked the question to a few guys, and definitely the response back is just be patient with it. It's not a short-term crop that we're putting in. This specifically on this type of land, just the way it is, it's quite light land. Obviously, in this picture, we're down in a bit of a low, but it's probably going to be entering into our perennial rotation and staying in for a very long time. I don't know if it'll ever come out just the way the field is. If we can get a good crop established, I think we'll be very happy with utilizing it in a grazing system. So definitely thinking about the long term on these perennials, not looking to just recoup on the 10 or 15 animal unit days an acre that we would have got off of this crop in the fall, and putting some of those root systems in jeopardy heading into the winter. Luckily this year we had a ton of snow. So there is a case maybe we could have grazed it off and had still luck, but more cases than not, I think just leaving it, utilizing it for a good snow catch, and getting ready to use it the year following and the years down the road. Picture on the right. All right. I guess it was from that first batch of forage that we seeded down in 2022. That would have been in the same field where the combine and the old swather were in cutting the oats. So that's kind of what it looks like in the spring of 2024. We grazed it the first year of solely perennial production in 2023. Most cases, guys will use that for haying in the first year, just to try and give it, I guess, more of an ability to regrow or a clean slate on cutting. Just some of the root systems might not be established as much, but we were in a position we needed the grass for grazing. So we grazed it at a little bit less density than normal, I would say, in 2023. Once over for sure, some of it got a second grazing. And then this is what it looked like going into 2024. So really happy with the catch. Obviously a really high stand of alfalfa, but lots of tall fescue and orchard grass when you get into it. So yeah.
So, Connor, I'm my own worst enemy here. We're going a little bit long, but I got a question for you. So a stand like that you're going into graze, like the one on the right with a high percentage of alfalfa, at what maturity does that alfalfa get to before you're getting an ideal cow patty?
It's usually full bloom on the alfalfa. I've found it's usually a pretty good state. Definitely recommend just lots of lots of just being with your cows when you're in that area, lots of observation, I guess I should say. We've been seeing kind of once we get 3/4 to full bloom on the alfalfa, we're feeling pretty safe regardless on moving. We would move into immature alfalfa like this, just really monitoring them a lot. Might mean a few extra moves in the day, or taking a straw bale or two out there to try and settle their stomachs out, just because it's so high of quality. But yeah, anything the 3/4 to the full bloom and beyond that, we've been really happy with the responses our cows have had for grazing it and being in a good position to succeed with it. I think alfalfa is one of those things in the cattle business. It's everyone worries about it a whole lot, and we just need to get out there and actually observe what's going on. Maybe take a little bit more time, and we can utilize a really high quality product like this, not only to pack pounds onto cows, but we can really increase our animal unit days an acre in a grazing system utilizing legumes such as this at any maturity states, I guess I would say. So really observation and monitoring them, but kind of in that 3/4 to full bloom, we've seen lots of success with having good manure pats, I guess you should say. It looks like everything's rocking and rolling in the cow, and they're happy and we're happy.
Cool.
So this year, the blends are kind of designed obviously for grazing, but we had the opportunity this year to make some hay out of a few of the paddocks that were sowed down in 2022. So it was pretty interesting. I figured after we dry baled some of this hay, we were right around the 5,000 pounds an acre of dry matter that we were taking off. And we were kind of leapfrogging. We would graze a paddock, hay the next one, graze the next one, hay the next one kind of thing. So they were very similar on production side of things. And we were taking about 5,000 pounds of dry matter off. And our grazing animal unit days an acre, we were right around the 90 to 100 animal unit days an acre, kind of in mid to late July with the cow herd. And we were returning trampling in the 2,500, I would say at a minimum, of biomass per acre, laying that back down onto the ground. And we were consuming less than we sometimes do just because we had high amounts of forage availability this year. But I would say we were still in the 60 to 70% range for consumption, and able to really turn that back onto the ground. And that really resulted in some pretty cool seeings later in the year. We start to see some of this regrow, and the regrowth on the stuff that we grazed was very, very much healthier. Things looked a lot better, a lot more of it than the paddocks that we hayed. And that was just the sole fact of we had taken completely everything away in the paddocks that we hayed, and the ones that we grazed, we were turning a minimum of 2,500 pounds of biomass back onto the ground. So yeah.
Cool.
And then I guess, yeah, lastly, to wrap up there, it's a couple more shots from that field for regrowth heading into later this fall. Once again, really, really happy with our catch of perennials. The full season did very well as well on a regrowth side of things. So there's quite a bit of Italian ryegrass growing back, especially in that picture on the right. So we'll see what things look like this spring moving into it. We plan to push it into our grazing system this summer. We'll probably move into it a little bit later in the year, like to give the plants a chance to kind of hit maturity, flowering state at least before we move in on that first year. Seemed to work good in years past. So yeah.
Cool. Well, as per every conversation we've ever had, we're about twice as long as we expected.
We're doing okay.
Great job, Connor. No, that was awesome. Okay, Connor's going to stick around. So just a reminder, questions in the Q&A, not the chat, and I'm going to filter through them as we go here. I'm jotting some notes down, so keep the questions coming. That's awesome. Well, we missed a couple from Connor, but that's quite all right. So Gerald, if you can hear me all right, let's get your face up here. Perfect. And your mic on. Perfect. So Gerald Bos from Rapid City. So Gerald, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, your operation, and then we'll dive into it like we did with Connor here.
Okay. Operate a family farm just a mile west of Rapid City, right along the Little Saskatchewan River. Our main enterprise is cow calf. We also sell dairy hay into the U.S. market along with straw. So we got a couple different things going on that seem to fit well together. So yeah, we've been into perennial forages for many decades, and we do a lot of short rotation stands on some local grain growers' land as well. We've been fortunate enough to reach some agreements with them to include forage in their rotation, in their grain rotation. So that's a 5-year program that we do there, and that works pretty nice for both of us. So, and then it seems like we're always establishing perennial forages for our pastures as well. So
So
rotating
Gerald,
pieces around.
I didn't plan this, but it's uh, uh, probably the number one question as far as managing a stand once it's established is, well, and I'm curious from the grain farms that you're partnering with, what do you see as far as stand longevity? Like you had mentioned 5-year agreements with the grain farms that you're working with. I guess what's a you like to see a productive stand at as far as the number of years you keep it in? And maybe just touch on just quickly what you've seen to extend that stand as far as like what you're leaving going into winter, whether you're grazing it, how many cuts you take off in the year, but just like some rules of thumb as far as what you can kind of expect versus the management, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and I guess we got two fairly different scenarios going on with the hay production. We like the 5-year stand. The ground is still nice and level. We roll all our hayland every year and do an annual fertilizer application the same time as we're rolling it, so that keeps the stand strong, and also we're replacing the nutrients that we're removing. We don't want to be mining the grain guy's land. So and then on the grazing end, we'll have stands in up to 15 years. We rotational graze everything. So it gets good rest periods, and it always gets mixed up so that not the same piece is getting grazed, just before that first killing frost. So by always switching stuff like that up, the stand will last quite a bit longer.
Cool. Well, I'm assuming we're going to chat more about that when we get into the Q&As, so we might as well get into talking about some blends here. So what are we looking at here, Gerald?
Here's some blends that we're actually going to sow this spring. That's a pasture blend there on the left, and we've actually got two. We started doing some sculpture seeding with variations in the soil. We'll have kind of a saline blend made up, and a small percentage of the field gets sown to that around potholes, and just low-lying, more saline ground that's not going to do as well with the other blend. So we'll seed that first, and then we'll sow the rest of the field with our main blend, which it's made up of. We've got 5 different varieties of grass in there, and also 5 different varieties of legumes as well. So as far as pounds goes, we've got 5 pounds of legumes in there, and 10 pounds of grass. So our blends have kind of evolved over the years, seeing what grasses work for us and stuff. And we do like to mix it up so we can graze at different times of the year as well. So
what are you trying to hit as far as an alfalfa percentage for safety or ease of management, Gerald?
Well, it kind of varies because just like Connor said too, his first year when after establishment, you've got a lot more alfalfa than you would maybe expect. The grass does take longer to get going. So, it'd be more than half, especially in those first years, but we seem to manage around it. I can't even remember the last time we lost a cow to bloat, so it's just a matter of managing your rotational grazing and getting them onto it. And once you've got them onto it, then it doesn't seem to be an issue.
So is there any other species you would want to touch on here in the blends where, that has impressed you over the years, or it wasn't there at the start and you've added it in?
Well, I guess one that's not on the list is smooth brome, and that's one I would not recommend. We did use that in the blend, probably a few decades ago, and eventually it took over the whole stand. So we definitely avoid that one. Meadow brome is still my favorite. We do like the orchard grass as well, although it can get away on you. It can get pretty rank if you're don't get there soon enough sometimes. But when you're grazing it, if they pound that one into the ground, that's not the end of the world either. So and
Gerald,
then for sorry.
or go ahead, go ahead.
And then for the alfalfa, we actually do use that 10-5 alfalfa, which is 5 different kinds of alfalfa in that blend, along with some sicer and some clovers.
So Gerald, the question I was before I interrupted you there, I apologize. The wheatgrass, we get a lot of feedback from producers and this is the beauty of the region that we cover is it varies so much. But there's producers in Saskatchewan that just rave about well, even slender wheatgrass. Connor and I were just chatting about this before we came on, but there's also producers in Manitoba that just hate this stuff. I'm curious your opinion. Obviously, you're a fan. You've got a few different varieties, and I like the concept of wheatgrass better than I actually like the practice of it. But I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I haven't got a lot of knowledge on it yet because this I don't think we've had it in a blend yet. This is a new one we came up with for this year, so we'll have to follow up on that one. But that's in the saline areas we're gonna use that one in. So hopefully it works out well on that ground. So we got something growing at least.
Yeah, it is a very salt tolerant grass for sure. And I won't trash talk wheatgrass. I know there's people from all over the prairies on here, so we'll save that for question period. So
Right.
talk a little bit about your equipment, and I think I'll probably ask you a few follow-up questions just as far as specifics, seed to soil contact, timing of seeding and whatnot. But tell us what your seeding tools here.
Yeah, we've got an old Flexicoil 5000. I think it's from the 90s. So it's a whole press. We've got the carbide openers on it, and I think that's the main thing. We had a lot older drill before this, even an old Versatile, but it had the carbides on there, which we like the whole presses. If you can cut a nice trench to drop that seed in and get some good packing, some good seed to soil contact. That seems to be the key thing we find. So we usually like to seed towards the end of May, kind of May long type thing. And hopefully the frosts are done, and we will wait for good soil conditions. We don't like to mud it in. So we will definitely wait a little longer, closer to June if we have to get the right conditions. This past year we established the field, and conditions were not ideal. It was a pretty wet spring, but we got it in, and fortunately it stayed wet, so that's why we got away with it. If it would have dried up after that, I don't think we would have had the stand we got. So
So
and
are
then
you are you seeding everything in one pass, like annuals, like your cover crops or your nurse crops and the perennials? And I guess if yes, how are you deciding on the seed depth?
We're usually sowing at 1/2 inch, and we used to use cover crops with it, but we have actually shifted away from that. We used to sow about 1/2 bushel of oats with our forage, and we would actually blend it up together in a mixed mill, the forage seed and the oats, to make it flow through the drill better too. That was with our older drill. But we've had some issues in the past where it's jeopardized the stand, either at harvesting those oats, and we usually took them as green feed, but even 1/2 bushel would produce 4 1,500-pound bales of green feed, so it still produced a huge crop and did compete with the forage that we were trying to establish. So we have backed away from using a nurse crop with it and just go in direct with the seed, with the forage seed.
And this photo on the right here, I assume that's your land leveler.
Yes, that's right. It's an egg shield land roller. It's got the blades on the front. So we roll, all our hayland gets rolled every year and leveled out. And then because we apply fertilizer every year, we've used the air tank there and just blow it on. It's just blown on top. It's not incorporated. It's actually, the hoses are behind the roller where it blows our fertilizer blend on.
So what are we looking at here?
This was last year, the field that we established. This is a pasture blend we've got here. This is towards the middle or end of June or July, August, sorry. We've swathed this and we're baling it. You can kind of see the bales in the foreground there. So we're wrapping it as silage bales. So it is just weeds, that whatever weeds came up that we're taking off at this point. We kind of like to get them before they go to seed, and we like to cut fairly high, like 6 to 8 inches high. We don't want to scalp the ground on that new establishment, and we, if possible, we try and time it so it's not super hot out when we're cutting it either, so it gets blasted by the sun. And then we get those bales off ASAP, so that stand is protected. I think the next picture shows a forage harvester, so that's another good option to do that as well, to get that crop off as quick as you can.
Gerald, I'm wondering, have you, while establishing a perennial hay stand, have you ever tried like dry baling the like the nurse crop, or is it just something that the dry down time you're concerned about, killing or setting back the perennial stand?
We did used to do that before we had a silage wrapper. We would dry bale the green feed, and we did get in trouble a few times with that, where there were strips in the field that you could see where the swath had just laid too long and choked the crop out.
What do you think how much time do you think that is, if you had to guess?
Oh, that's a few years ago, but maybe a week,
Yeah,
right? If you get caught, if you cut it and you get caught with the rain and don't get it off. So
yeah. Are you good going to the next slide, Gerald?
yeah. Here's that same field later in the year. I can't remember what time it was, but be September, I think, and had some fantastic regrowth on that. We won't graze a newly established stand in the year of establishment. We'll wait till next year. We'll let it get a good growth on it and trap snow, and then it's ready to go for next year. We have taken a second cut on a hay field on an alfalfa stand, but then we would wait till a good killing frost before we do that.
Any detrimental effects as far as winter kill when doing that?
We haven't done it often, and we did cut a little higher as well. So, but yeah, we got away with it on that field. It didn't seem to be an issue. So
Yeah.
we're worried about on the grazing that we're gonna pull plants out if we graze it on establishment year.
So now we're into, I assume this is full hay production. So I guess talk a little bit about what's going on here, and I've got a few follow-ups as far from a management standpoint I'm curious about.
Yeah, this is obviously a hay field, so we do export hay into the U.S. dairy market. So here we are reaping the rewards of a well-established stand. Baling some, looks like second cut there. So we do usually get at least 2 and quite often 3 cuts a year. We like to cut very early, so we have started either wrapping the bales on first cut, and this past year we actually got first cut chopped to get it off quick, because it's very hard to make dry hay in June, especially dry enough to square bale.
So what you'll take first cut kind of for your farm and livestock operation, and then focus on kind of the higher quality, excuse me, dry hay for export.
But yes, that's right.
Any detrimental effects as far as stand longevity if you're trying to sneak in 3 cuts on a regular year, or is it just something you're choosing to do on a wet year where you know there's adequate moisture for regrowth going into winter?
Yeah, with a short rotation, we're taking as much production as we can get, and the third cut is usually after frost, so there is chance of winter kill, but it it really hasn't been bad in that short of a rotation, and we are fertilizing annually too, which will make your stand better resistant to winter kill as well. So
So let's talk about your grazing now.
there you go. Here's some cows grazing. This is an older stand actually. This is one that has been taken out since. You can see there's not a lot of legumes left in this stand, and that one was in, oh, I don't know exactly, but it would have been 15 years that this stand was in, and it produced well right up to the end, but we are starting to rotate some corn through our grazing lands. So we will take it out, and then the plan is to go into corn for 5 years, and then back into a perennial forage for at least 10 years or more. So
So the corn you'll be grazing like for winter forage?
no, we'll be chopping that
Oh,
for,
chopping the corn, yeah.
yeah, we do retain all our calves over winter to background, and then possibly graze again next year. So we are chopping the corn.
So what are
Another
we looking at here? Of course,
yeah, I didn't have a lot of pictures, but this was a good forage picture, so we thought we'd throw it in there. Yeah, that's obviously a great stand.
So
Um,
give us an idea, I guess, how old this stand is and kind of what the management practice is after year 1 of establishment for you guys.
um, I'm not even sure where this picture was taken, to be honest, but on a newly established, the next year going in, we might try and delay when we start grazing on it, maybe closer to the end of June, middle of June, end of June before we go into that one. And, it seems, I don't think I've ever said that we've gone too fast on the first rotation of grazing. So we try and get across pretty quick and just, take the top off and move on and come back later in the year. So it's, the faster you seem to go, the more it seems to regrow. So
What would you take, like, as far as, I know the old rule of thumb is take half, leave half, but there's a lot more nuance to it than that. Is there something you're looking for specifically when you're going over it that first year or two?
yeah, it really depends on time of year too. When we're first going, a paddock might only last 1 or 2 days with the group of cows we have on there. And as we get more growth, then we'll slow things down. But yeah, it's we, as far as how much we take, I would say at least half before we move on. So
Well, if we talk any more about this, I'm gonna have to mute Connor. I can tell he's chomping at the bit and wants to get in on this. No time. I think that's all we had for you, Gerald. So appreciate you coming on. Stick around for Q&A. And thanks a lot. Great job. So
thank you, Joe.
Nick, if you want to turn your camera on and your mic. So Nick Petruic from Avonlea, Saskatchewan. So Nick is our grain producer on the panel tonight, which is just great to hear his perspective and what's going on the farm. So Nick, take it away. Let's hear about your family, your operation, And how's the weather out there?
All right, well, let's get the weather question out of the way. It's better than it was yesterday, so
Same.
we're onwards and upwards. But Joe, I got to give you the full disclaimer and give everybody the full disclaimer is listening, because I might be the only person on this call who doesn't like cows. So want everybody to know that. I see value for them, but I currently don't have any personally. Me and my wife Carly, we don't have any, but there are a bunch in the operation. So I'm feeling a little out of place here following up Gerald and Connor. I don't have a lot to talk about on that side. But just to
It's
give,
you have lots to offer on this conversation, Nick. It's just not the same as theirs.
well, there you go. You're not going to hear a lot of cow love on this side, but I'll talk about what I do love here. And I got my family, my wife Carly, and I got 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, and we farm at Avonlea, Saskatchewan. For those who don't know where that is, it's just on the east side of the Missouri Coteau in southern Saskatchewan, right in the heart of the Palliser Triangle. You know, that piece of desert that was uninhabitable by man or beast, apparently. That's where we farm. And we've been here for a long time doing it because we're kind of stubborn, and I guess that's why we're here, and we can survive. But like for me and everything around our farm, it's all about moisture. Okay, I'm going to preface this whole conversation. Everything we do around here is around the rain. We get about 8 inches a year. That's about on average. And this year it all came before July 2nd. So we didn't get anything after that. Okay. But just a little bit about the farm. So you can go forward here, Joe. Again, in my farm operation, there is myself, 2 brothers, 2 brother-in-laws, an uncle, and my dad. Okay. So we got 7 people kind of living off this farm. We have a pedigreed seed division here, and you can see our seed plant that we built in 2018 when I came back to the farm. So this is our kind of our main hub for our pedigreed seed. So that's everything. We'll produce everything from select plots, which are 2-acre seed plots, up to all the way down to certified seed production, which is what we would mostly sell to farmers. So we would sell a lot of cereals, a lot of durum type of cereals down here. A lot of pulses are in our rotations, as well as flaxseed as well too. So a certain percentage of our acres every year are dedicated to seed specific. We have to follow a really close rotation. We have to have certain separation between like-minded seeds, because like I said, I may grow durums, but I might have 4 different durums on the whole farm, right? So we have to have a lot of attention to detail where we're putting things, be very careful, and have very good record keeping. The remainder of the acres are made up of our commercial grain acres. So we'll have some commercial canola seed production. Sorry, it's not seed production, it's just commercial canola, as well as anything that doesn't make seed spec. And in addition, I don't have much to do with it, but we do have a cow-calf herd as well. They have about 400 head of animals, 400 head of cows, and they get a calf on them, I guess. I think that's how it works usually, right, Joe? I don't really follow that side too much. But it works pretty good because through our cleaning plant, we put through about 150,000 bushels a year. We take about a 10% cut. So we usually have an ample amount of screenings to feed cattle and to do different things for backgrounding on that too. So as much as I hate selling, taking good durum screenings and feeding cows, we got to all play nice on this farm.
That's the most valuable thing those durum screenings could be used for, in my opinion.
Well,
And I'm assuming
agree to disagree.
there's someone on your farm that would agree with me as well.
Yeah, when I started to actually tell them they had to start to maybe pay, or like start documenting how much money is actually going into feeding the cows, they didn't like that very much. They liked it when it was just more of the bin just stayed full.
You don't want to dive into those numbers too deep. Well, maybe this year you can, but 2000 to 2021, yeah, you don't want to dive into that too hard.
No, that was tough. About the time there was 25 bushel or $25 an acre canola, there was $21 a bushel durum. So
Oof.
yeah. So that's kind of like an overview of the farm, but kind of in addition to that, we do research as well on the farm. I come from a sales background. I worked with Bayer Crop Science for a lot of years, had a lot of great times there, met a lot of great people. I learned a lot about sales and research in that. And when I came back to the farm, I said, I want to take this here and I want to build this into our seed business. So I started off just doing strip trials myself with my drill, just basic stuff, and saw some pretty big things. And then we started to get a little bit more advanced. And then actually my sister and brother-in-law decided to come home as well too. And they've kind of taken over the research business, which works out really good for me. I get to just kind of dream up what I kind of want to see in it and insert a few protocols into what they're doing, because they're doing about 4,000 or 5,000 plots a year for everybody else under the sun. Essentially, they have crop science companies, they've got varietal trials, all sorts of stuff there too. So a lot of the stuff that I make recommendations like for my seed business, I'll derive out of the research. So research is very, very important to me, and how we sell and what we do here.
Just let me know. Do you want to keep moving, Nick?
Yeah, we might as well. Yeah, we
Sure.
might as well. Again, I kind of just threw some pictures to Connor, and maybe I didn't do it 100% right. I didn't build quite a show that's you know, that flows that nicely, but we'll just talk about it a little bit.
You're all good.
Yeah, so like on the left-hand side, we kind of have I should have mentioned on our seed business, we also, so not only do we sell, say, derm seed to farm customers, we also retail cover crop seeds and the perennial forage seeds as well too. Basically, we want to be a one-stop shop for customers to come and purchase from us, and honestly have a good agronomic conversation about it. Because we are on the Missouri Coteau, there's a lot of cow-calf operations, or sorry, cattle and grain operations, mixed farms in the area. We wanted to supply a lot of other people. So we started off, I think I experimented with cover crops in 2009 a little bit, but really didn't get into them until I met up with you guys, Joe, with the Cover Than Crow brand, because I kind of liked what I was seeing from a research perspective. Honestly, I'll be 100% honest. That's why I started to dig into it a bit more, was because some of the research you guys were doing, talking about, the canopy architecture. I think it was the first time I heard of you talking about, the different plants in there. It made a lot of sense to me, because I really care what comes out of the ground, not really what grazes on top of the ground. So I wanted to kind of understand that. And what we've seen, like we've played around with full season, warm season, and cool season crops. And the winner that I like, which is what's in the left-hand side, is the cool season for my area. And there's a few reasons for that one. Number one, actually, is probably because of how it times with the rest of our operation. We're very busy. We have 12 different seed types that all require 12 different cleanouts for my drill every year. So seeding window is very complicated and small. On average, I get 10 really, really good seeding days. And I hate having to ram a forage crop in the middle of it, because I kind of want to have it, see if I can find a way to, maximize my lentil seed production or different there. So by timing a cool season crop really, really early, like we were seeding ours on April 25th, it worked really good for us in the past couple of years. So I don't have to wait for that soil temperature to warm up. I'm not going to lose those warm season plants. Yeah. And for us, as I mentioned at the start of our talk, was moisture.
Yeah, more moisture.
Yeah, moisture. I need moisture, and I can usually have moisture in early April. In fact, if I can get out like the beginning of April, I will. I'm not afraid of it. So like there's a lot of good things in that mix that can get up and going. And this past year, we did throw some perennial stuff in it. Like I said, we can talk about that a little bit later. But for us, we are just moving more and more to early seeding, and that's for not just forages, just everything we can cram in earlier. We're seeing a yield response in our area. Picture on the right is just me taking pictures as I'm driving and writing in my phone notes so I don't forget. These are two different lentil varieties that I grow on the farm, and it was kind of a surprise trial. I ran out of one seed. You can see my isolation strip on the right-hand side. And then I just had to finish up with a different one, and come around desiccation timing, I could start seeing, obviously maturity differences. I could start to see the plants were flatter. I saw better disease resistance with one variety. So I make a lot of my decisions on what I'm going to keep growing and support to my customers based on stuff I see in the field like this all the time. So I don't mean to kill the Lima grain market or the sleeve market for Limas going in the future, but it's one that's going to be moving out of my program going forward, because Grims look way better. So
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so the picture on the right, I want to talk about that. That's my little guy in there, and he's there happily riding the sprayer with me. And you know, everybody always take pictures of them and their best crops, right? Everybody always has that picture of this, and it's really important to remember those ones. But you know, I think it's also important to remember the bad ones too. Here we are spraying out a field of lentils that's completely littered with kochia because it got smashed by a hailstorm here at the end of June, and we didn't harvest a single bushel off here. We actually had a neighbor come bale it all, and I took the kochia bales for feed because he was so hard up. But you know, I think it's important, you know, for us and our family that you know, we do use the farm as, you know, a place to, you know, make our livings, have some fun, and also just kind of those memories as we go by. And yeah, I guess I want my kids to kind of see that you can learn a lot from the bad times too, right?
You learn the most from the bad times, I would argue, Nick.
Yeah, I think they're the best lessons are the most expensive, right?
It
So
has to sting bad enough that you never forget. I tell
yeah.
people.
Yeah, and I think the picture on the left is when me and Dakota were out in the summertime. This was another cool season crop we had. This was actually where we did our research protocol with Dakota this past year. We took off, I wrote that down here, 40, I think we almost had as much as Connor did, I think, almost 4,680 pounds an acre on this production here, and it's literally a gravel pit. When Dakota was out, we couldn't even get the 6-inch ring in the ground hardly. It was basically just rocks and gravel. But the above ground mass that we were seeing from it, and you know, I just get more and more focused as I go forward here. And then when we're looking at selecting forage blends for the farm, that's what I do too. Like I help, they say what they want to plant or why they want to do it, or I ask a bunch of questions and we try to tailor it right with what I think is going to work. And you know, we don't do any monocrop blends anymore. We used to. We did ROI stuff in the past. I think we did on our research site. We did it, and I was seeing a better ROI with a better management time associated with it, with using some of these cover crops with multi-species blends in them. They just reduce my risk so much more.
So what, maybe talk a little bit about the trials you were doing. Was this one of the trials, Nick, where you had underseeded to perennials?
So this one specifically did not have it. No. So some of the trials that we did at first, Joe, were I took the same blend and just different seeding dates and tried to see a response, and then compared that to feed barley essentially, and just cut it all and just weighed it out and took a nutrient analysis with it. And what we saw was that we were seeing less input costs for our cover crop seeds comparatively, and very similar tonnage. So to me, that was a win-win, right? If I can do the same job with less money, I'm going to do it. So I think I provided that to you guys, or I think you've seen that slide, that ROI slide.
Yeah, you betcha.
Yeah, that was some of the stuff we did on our farm. But this one specifically was just kind of, we were trying to get some good forage production, sorry, on some pretty crappy land. It was trying to do our best, got on it early as fast as we could. The other stuff that we seeded with the perennials, though, that field had a problem with salinity, and we actually wasn't established. It was an alfalfa blend. Don't ask me exactly what was all in it, but it got kind of like 75% of the field was established, and we had these 25% of it was foxtail patches throughout it. And every year they were cutting it, and then they were baling it and burning it. And I finally said, enough of that. Like, so we tilled it up, and then we actually planted cool season with a perennial in it, just into those patches, and kind of overseeded a little bit. And didn't really know what to expect, you know, just because it was a saline area with heavy foxtail pressures. But honestly, the competitiveness of the crop was amazing. And it really, I don't have any pictures of it, sorry guys. But it was enough that it choked this foxtail back. We got a cool season crop established in that year. And I guess this spring we'll actually see what kind of perennial stand we have in there. Because the old goal was to try to just not have foxtail everywhere, right? So
yeah. So Well, I guess we'll keep rolling too, Nick. I've got a
Yeah.
couple follow-up questions that I've jotted down, but as per usual with this webinar, we are wildly over time. But I'm not rushing you.
Oh,
Keep going.
I can go through it for sure. No, again, just me and my dirty overall showing we do commercially seed treat for customers as well too. Just a different service offering for people. They can come pick up their seed. We've even treated cover crop seeds and different things for guys if they're fighting with like, we can get into that later, but yeah, no, seed treating is in my background, so I'm pretty familiar with it. And on the right's just showing we've been hosting field days since 2016 was my first one. Pretty simple stuff. We had some pretty unique learning opportunities throughout it. We've had everything from, northern quinoa growers come out. We've had faba bean growers come out. We just try to provide learning opportunities for people in Southern Saskatchewan. There's not a whole bunch close by. So basically, I kind of have a dream board. We write down what I kind of want to learn, what I want to figure out, try a few different things. I asked my sister and brother-in-law, how much can I do? And they tell me, and then we kind of plan a tour around it and how to fit it in. And it's a lot of fun to kind of get people together, and usually kind of have a customer appreciation thing. And we have a website that we usually post all of our results and things that we put up there, because it's how we help sell our seed and help our brand establishment. We want to be a seed company that knows more, so we can provide more. So
Nick, we're pretty similar in that way. I absolutely love research. Melanie and I on our trip, I carry a notebook around with me everywhere, just in case I have an idea that I don't want to forget. I jot it down. I don't have a brother and sister-in-law, but I have a Dakota, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
has made my life so much better. Because it is one thing to dream a research project, it is a whole nother thing to follow it through and document the whole damn thing. And it really is a thankless job. It's not sexy, but it's important, right? It's like, this is how we grow, this is how we learn and test new ideas.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's a lot of fun, and I appreciate it, and it's a great opportunity. Honestly, Joe, I'm gonna call out everybody on the call here too, just so you know, like I didn't host one last year, and I'm kind of debating if I'm gonna host one this year because I wasn't getting a whole bunch of farmers coming, right? I was getting more industry folks, which is great, but I'm here for the farmer too, right? So if I put on a tour, I want to have a bunch of farmers come. I want to have, fun and learning there. So if I do something, like I got to figure out how to get farmers there, right? Because I know everybody's busy. We're always going to be busy, and I don't think it ever changes, regardless of what time of year. We got to make
Yeah.
time for this stuff, and or maybe we don't. Maybe the day of the tour is dead. I don't know. I'm not sure yet.
I think he had a band, but that's for another topic.
Okay, that's just another picture, Joe. We can just go through. It's yeah. And then kind of just showing our workforce on the right-hand side, we've got, there's my 74-year-old uncle who can outwork anybody still, can't take a day off hardly ever. He's in there working. And then just kind of showing like with our plant, we have 6 machines that separate 6 different ways. And we can actually separate by color as well too, which is kind of what that picture is showing. You have the raw sample on the left, is what we ejected from the color sorter, which is anything that just looks different. I can set the parameters to whatever I want, and then our finished product in the middle. So I'm really happy I can make like basically a premium product for anybody else out there. And again, like my whole plant too, when I designed it, I actually designed it to do intercrop separation as well as kind of a different revenue item, and or revenue stream if things needed to go that way. And I did some intercropping, and it all worked out fine, and it yielded fine. But when the crop prices were super high, it actually didn't pencil out to mix a crop. It was penciled out to do a straight crop. So I think there's a real business case for when crop prices drop, like we're kind of seeing right now, to intercropping actually making a lot more sense, because you can kind of compete that way when you don't have such as high commodity prices.
I actually sat in a presentation today at Egg Days where there was a producer panel talking about this very subject that actually a good friend of mine, I'll shout him out, Chris Seymour, was talking about when extreme high commodity prices, they have different revenue streams, which is they get to graze the livestock and they're further intercropping so they can graze in the fall. But he said when the prices were max height for commodities, he said, yeah, it was touch and go, but because they had another revenue stream to be able to utilize that plant biomass, that they were intercropping. And he said now that the price of canola has dropped 40% or whatever, he says it's a no-brainer. Peas and oats will win from a profitability standpoint on their farm this year. And just from a risk standpoint, you know, it's lowering your costs substantially. And I mean, the over yielding effect is like, I know your conditions are different than our conditions on our farm, but we just see it time and time again that we can produce a substantial amount, whether it's biomass or grain production, just with a simple intercrop, something like peas and oats. So yeah, you obviously have a sharp pencil, Nick, and you should get that baby back out and write down some numbers, especially if you're set up for it.
Yeah, well, and for sure. And again, like the whole farm's VR mapped as well too. And when we actually did it last time, we VR rate seeded our peas and canola as well too. So you kind of pick your spots where you want different things to do. So like it's really easy to do when you have the technology there. Like it's not hard. And no, like you said, it's just when you give two plants equal opportunity, they perform well together. You just have to have a plan.
For sure. Well, you got any final thoughts, Nick, I guess, before we get to Q&A?
No, I'm good, Joe.
Cool. Well, great job, you guys. Gerald and Connor, if you guys want to pop your faces up here. So we did go a little late, but that is quite all right. We got some questions coming in. Maybe I'll start off with the first question that was asked. It was about fertility on a perennial hay stand. So I know, Nick, that this isn't necessarily your forte, but you've got some really great insight from a research and fertility standpoint. So Gerald, you mentioned it a few times. Connor, I am familiar with your practices, but good for the audience to hear it. So maybe Gerald, we'll start with you and go to Connor, and then Nick, if you've got any insight on the question, fire away. So Gerald, what are you doing as far as fertility on perennial stand, I guess longevity or tonnage? And I guess just your thought process, how you came to that.
Yeah, I guess we worked with our with our input dealer Redferns to come up with a maintenance blend on our alfalfa. It's the hayland's the only thing that we fertilize. We don't fertilize our pastures at all. So it's mostly phosphate and potash with some sulfur that's in the blend, and it gets applied as soon as we can get on the land to do the rolling and blow the fertilizer on, and hopefully you get a nice rain after that.
Cool. Connor?
Yeah, the last couple of years, we've been in right around 40 pounds of actual nitrogen. And that's about all we've been doing. Obviously, the year-to-year basis, we're grazing pretty much all of our perennial pastures and not much haying at all, aside from this year a little bit. So definitely fertility is just coming from the back of the cow moving forward. And yeah, that's kind of our game plan moving forward, but a little bit up front on establishment, and that goes along with the companion crop too. So yeah.
So Nick, I'll leave this a little bit more open-ended for you. If you haven't done research on it, all good. But your thoughts on the question, I guess, if you got any interesting insights that you got burning.
Yeah, so in the past, when we were just like 4 or 5 years ago, when we were just doing like a straight perennial blend establishment, we were putting like 5 years worth of like specifically 1152 FOSS down at one time, just putting a huge heavy band down at the year of establishment and allowing that crop to kind of feed on it for 5 years. Like, because we had separation from, like, we didn't put it in the seed row, we put it down a mid row band or far away from the root. So essentially kind of did that because FOSS isn't very mobile, so the roots have to get into it essentially. So that's what we were managing that. Recently though, we did do a trial where we actually put about 40 pounds like of 1152, so 20 pounds of FOSS, essentially product, down with the seed. And in year one, we didn't see a yield response with it. We didn't see a maturity response with it. We didn't see much with it. So we haven't been putting a whole bunch. Again, that kind of like a 20 pounds of FOSS, just kind of a maintenance start there when we're seeding our cover crops. Now, just because I don't like, again, in our cool soils, any advantage we can have to get it up and out of the ground faster from the phosphor fertilizer, I think I like to see.
So this maybe segues pretty good. We got, what's the biggest change that you've made the first time establishing perennials to the last time you've established perennials? So maybe we'll do it in reverse order. Nick, you had a nice segue there, but any other, I mean, the fertilizer is a great example, but any other example you can give as far as what you were doing, say 10 years ago versus now?
Well, seeding date for sure. Seeding date perennials were always done like last when everything else was done. Everything else was done, and maybe even got a little spraying done. You'd go out and play around and kind of had marginal success. Honestly, we've kind of shifted our focus to let's do it fast, let's do it right and do it early. So seeding date for sure. And actually I actually got some customers who are playing with frost seeding some perennials like in the fall. So I haven't done it myself yet. I'm interested because I have areas on the farm that are really difficult to seed because they're wet all the time. And I'd like to see if we can't get some roots established in them.
What are you hearing from those guys, Nick?
Well, again, we were just playing around with it last year, Joe. We will see this spring, essentially.
Well, these drones have got me very interested in that. And we actually, we had plans this fall. We had light snowfall, and we're just waiting for the right conditions. We ended up getting about 1.5 feet of snow, but that frost seeding is something that in our condensed growing season, it just seems to be, if you can get it established, what an absolute advantage you have. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to try as well. So Connor, if you remember the question, first year you established perennials, what you're doing now, what you're doing differently.
I guess just a little bit. I know in the past when I was young, Dad would be putting down 30 or 40 acres to perennials, and we would always use it with a cash crop. Same as we did in 2022, oats or barley. We've done wheat in the past too. And I think the transition to utilizing it as a feed source crop earlier in the year just sets ourselves up for more success. Crack open the canopy earlier in the summer, not put any more pressure on the perennials that need to be. Obviously interesting watching what Gerald has got going on there with no companion crop and utilizing whatever does grow that first year. So that might be something we try in the future too.
Gerald?
Yeah, my first perennial crop was many years ago, but as far as changes, I guess the use of a nurse crop would be the biggest change that we've made. We used to always use some oats or barley as a cover crop to go with it, and I think going back to our grain growing days, we would even harvest it as well as grain. So and then moved into taking it off as a feed crop, as a green feed first dry, and then going to wrapped bales, and now chopping it right off and going without a cover crop. So it seems like you are going to get something for a cover crop. Like even this year with nothing seeded, we still got over 2 bales an acre of wrapped bales. So
Well, I got a quick, just funny story. When I first went down this soil health path, looking back, the mistakes you made, they're funny, but hey, if you make them hurt, you remember them. I sowed down 1/3 of the farm to monocrop alfalfa, and we're just working at cycling perennials through our farm. So everything I sowed down with 3/4 of a bushel of oats, so it was like 28 pounds. Of course, I was using a Borgo 8800, so it might have been 35, it might have been 20, who knows, certain spots of the field. But we anyway, we were cutting the crop and realized it's like, well, we got way too much hay. And the crop looked good, so we took some to harvest. So we had oats seeded at like 28 pounds, and we had our cash crop oats that were seeded at 100 pounds. You guys know what the yield difference was? Nothing.
nothing, yeah.
The exact identical yield with, so I know that depends on the year and whatnot, but I bring up the story from kind of the context of what Gerald's talking about, which is, hey, if you're trying to establish a perennial, the perennial is your cash crop. And even at 3/4 of a bushel, or if you're sowing a full season cover crop, I think it's something to be cognizant of. It's like, 96% of a plant is sunlight and water. And if it's buried under a canopy and not accessing sunlight, well, maybe it can hang on for a while, but once you remove that canopy, that is a pretty stressed and vulnerable plant. Heat, moisture, wind, there's a lot of things that can set that plant back. And I think that's a really important management practice, is to be out there, see what your perennial crop is doing, what the health is like, how much sunlight it's getting, and base your management decision on that if that's the route that you're going to go. Sorry, guys, I got a few more questions here. So, Nick, I kind of wanted to start with you, and Gerald, you're kind of doing something similar as well. So, Nick, you're obviously the resident grain farmer on this panel. I'm curious your thoughts about perennials. I mean, you're also a research man as well. Your thoughts on incorporating perennials in a conventional system when grain prices are depressed the way they are today. I'm wondering if you've seen any value as far as after taking that perennial stand out, as far as what you see as far as improvements or not improvements on your cash crops going into the receding years.
Well, your number one benefit that I've seen is kind of like your weed seed bank is dramatically decreased, like by a lot. You can utilize perennials a lot to, like, when you have some tougher to kill weeds that are in a cycle that you have to that you need a perennial plant, they're competing them all the time. Kosher is the prime example. It's an annual. Its weed seeds cannot last forever. There's a tumbleweed essentially, right? So you can actually utilize a perennial to keep it out of the majority of your field, right? If you have it get caught up on the edges. Like that's probably the biggest one, but then also we are not losing. We are reusing a lot of the same groups a lot for herbicide management, right? So a couple years off just to give those weeds a break, have a different way to fight them. I think it's a really valuable tool to use a perennial in that way. Again, I like sprayer, and I think it's a very valuable tool. It allows me to manage my crop really, really well, and I think I'll use it for a long time. But I'm not a dummy, and I'm not going to sit there and say that you have to keep doing the same thing over and over. We rotate herbicides almost every year and groups every second year for sure, just to attack the weeds differently. So if you can, I use perennials as a weed control on the farm for sure. That's probably the biggest thing, Joe. And the reason, like, I don't know if there's, again, maybe we get some drones going and we can do some companion cropping that way. Timing of establishment of companions is tough in my area just because of moisture too, right? That's always my biggest thing. But
tough in my area where we get moisture.
Yeah.
So Gerald, I guess we'll throw it over to you and then we can go to Connor. I mean, you're obviously you found a landowner that sees the value and the benefit in incorporating perennials on their farm. I guess just how's that relationship going? What are they seeing, and what have you seen in the past after a perennial hay crop?
Yeah, I guess I'm not the one seeing the results as much as the grain growers are, but I think there is, a lot of benefits, just as Nick said, with the weeds, they're getting cut 3 times a year instead of chemical application to control them. So different mode of action there. So, and then also, the alfalfa roots going as deep as 12 feet into the ground. So that's really going to open up the soil profile and have a lot better water infiltration for quite a few years. I'm pretty sure I've seen studies where they had measurable differences for up to a decade after an alfalfa stand, like a yield bump in the grain crops.
Yeah, that was actually a old professor of mine at the university. I didn't learn a ton from university, but I learned some. And Martin Entz, I'm sure he had research from the University of Manitoba that was showing, more in organic systems, but showing yield bumps up to a decade later after a system. And I think the caveat is that wasn't left in 15 years, but using a perennial forage stand in that 5 to 7 years, taking it out of production, breaking up the weed cycle. I mean, you're just capturing, there's a ton of carbon that's going to break down over those next years that follow that perennial crop, that of course you're going to see some benefit from it. And I imagine in conditions like yours and mine, Gerald, no offense, Nick, but where you're getting the moisture and can infiltrate that water and actually start cycling those nutrients, you're probably going to see those results even faster. Connor?
Yeah, I guess I look at the profitability side of things right away. I know at my field day this summer, tried to put together a bit of a chart just on a comparison basis, looking at some of our high producing, what was called grain land at the time when we sowed it down, and what we're seeing on results from our high intensity grazing system and really utilizing these forages at their maximum potential. We could go neck and neck with any cash crop in a year like this for sure. I know I had some rough figures on what we were grazing at the time on some of our perennial stands, and I feel like we were pretty conservative on some of the numbers that I was using for animal unit days an acre and what we would be left with for regrowth that year as well. And I think especially in a year like this, obviously the cattle market is very high, but I think we're neck and neck with any system out there, especially on a depressed grain market right now. Obviously things change, and I think it's really valuable having a little bit of everything on the farm. I love the idea of the mixed farm and trying to utilize perennials within the rotation at some point. I see a ton of merit to that, whether it be the points like Nick and Gerald talked about for weed control or just utilizing moisture at different times of the year. Obviously those diverse root systems that can be established even in a 5-year window of cycling a perennial in can be just completely different than what any annual crop could look at. So whether that's breaking new channels into the soil, obviously able to increase our water holding capacity, and then just the constant breakdown of plant material or manure from the cattle is happening so much more frequent in a perennial setting when they're actively growing roots all throughout the year. So yeah, I think profitability number one, and then just looking at the different options that the perennials can add to a soil, whether it be reducing weed pressure, breaking some cycles, or just utilizing moisture and breaking down plant and manure at different times of the year.
And I'll add to that point, Connor. And of course, every farm is the circumstances are different, but I just like using perennials as a commodity insurance policy. So this past year, this past spring, sitting down doing grain budgets, and it is not looking extremely profitable. Well, we just made a plan that, okay, if the grain market's going to be depressed for 3 or 5 years, what an amazing opportunity to get that land back into perennials. Well, we're going to give it a break from a fertility standpoint. We're going to get a break from a herbicide standpoint. We're going to capture a ton of energy because we're growing 360 or whatever, 250 days a year. And in the meantime, we have other revenue streams on the farm that we can turn that plant biomass into revenue. It's very little risk. A similar profit potential is what the grain farm is looking like right now, and it just is a wonderful opportunity to cycle perennials back into the land. So I know my situation is different than Gerald's, is different than Nick's, is different than yours, but it's just a wonderful insurance policy in times when a certain segment of our farm is just not that profitable. So I think I've forgotten to do this basically every time I've hosted the webinar this year. So before I ask the last question, I'm going to give away the jacket. So Corny, you're going to get the jacket tonight. So put your mailing address. I'm sure Canada Post will get it to you. Maybe 2025. If it's 2026, that's not our problem. So Corny, you're going to get the jacket. And oh, well, we've got Cheryl from Western Quebec. So this is going to cost us a fortune in postage fee, Cheryl, but we're going to send a hat to you too. So if you guys would put your address in the box down below, we'll get that sent off to you. Hopefully somebody on the other end other than me is recording this information, of course. So the last question of the night, you guys, I always finish with it. because I'm sure we've got people on here that are on for a very specific reason, which is establishing perennials. So basically what we want is the best advice that you could give somebody that doesn't know a whole lot, that's just getting started. The farms that are coming on here, for the best, I guess, advice possible. So if you could summarize that in 30 seconds or a minute, as far as the best advice you could give them from establishing a perennial crop, what would that be? So maybe we'll start with you, Connor, and then go Nick and Gerald. You'll have the last word for tonight.
I guess myself would be have a plan in place well in advance before establishing a perennial crop. I know we ran into it with some major weed issues just on a competition side of things in the past. So really making a plan and kind of being a year or two out in advance, knowing that, hey, this might want to go down to a perennial stand. We know we're going to be restricted, obviously, with some herbicide products that we can use in that first year of establishment before they're up and running. But just kind of setting yourself up for success, whether it be a couple of specific crops prior to that perennial going in the ground. But just having cleanliness in a field, I found very important, and a plan afterwards on how you're going to utilize the companion crop that you're using, just to put those young species in a good position to succeed through that first winter.
Nick, you're up.
Okay. When you're planting a perennial, I would suggest make sure you use full rates. Don't cut rates. Again, you're trying to set it up for not just this year, it's next year, right? And talk about weed competition, you're leaving it out there, it's got to fight for a long time. Don't cut rates. Again, I like seeding it with our cover crops as well too, because I'm kind of planning my perennial for the next year crop, not this year, right? To make my cover crop is year one, my perennial is year two. Usually, again, in my area, you only have one good time to seed, or you only get like one good window. So be ready for it. And, you know, don't even look at the calendar sometimes, like just look at the land. If your land says go, go. And, you know, don't wait. So that's kind of the biggest thing I would say. And I'm with Gerald, roll everything you can. But I don't like rolling my stuff immediately after seeding. I actually like almost like just prior to ground crack, or even a little after ground crack. I like to roll it just so I know those little seeds are going to be up and going and not going to get sealed between too tight of moisture, or too tight of soil. Sorry.
Yeah. All right, Gerald, you're the veteran on this panel. Best advice for somebody that's just starting out.
Plan a long ways in ahead. Make sure your field is clean, especially of weeds that you're not going to be able to control within your stand. Yeah, don't be cheap on the rates. We try and get at least 12 pounds of alfalfa on our hay ground. Another thing to keep an eye on is seed coating. Some companies use a fair bit more seed coating than some of the other ones percentage wise, so you have to make that part of your calculation to get an actual 12 pounds of alfalfa on a hay stand, and then whatever grasses you're putting with it. For pasture blends, we're using about 15 pounds in total of seed. So and another good thing to do is put phosphate with the seed when you are seeding it. You can't put too much, but you can get away with you know, about 30 pounds. So depending on your drill, on your openers and stuff like that. So
Cool, guys. Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys spending the evening with us. Gerald, are you making it down to Egg Days tomorrow?
not till Thursday.
Well, you're not going to see me. I'm the boss
Oh.
now, so I get to leave Thursday to Egg Days.
Darn it.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, you guys. I appreciate it. Great information as always. Thanks for you that tuned in. We had a great crowd tonight. Great conversation. So have a great night, you guys. Thanks again, and cheers until next time.